Hey everybody, welcome to HistorIan Weekly or Historian Weekly. I haven't decided which one it's going to be. Let me know. Maybe both. We're going to talk about Thanksgiving today. Thanksgiving is a really interesting tradition that we have in the United States, and that it's kind of spread across also in Canada and other countries as well. And it has a rich history that I love talking about. And so we're going to do that with a little technology that I've built that I'm going to be pulling in photos really quickly. And so, for example, I'm going to be like, hey, you remember this? Yeah, Snoopy. So Americans will know that that is probably the best float of a Thanksgiving Day parade. So it's awesome. Boom, now I'm back. So we're going to talk a little bit about Thanksgiving. We're going to go through 3 facts about Thanksgiving, and I'll get some photos to kind of help us out. So the first fact is that Thanksgiving did not begin in North America. See, humans have actually been giving thanks in time of seasonal harvest for thousands of years. For example, I'll show you guys. Boom. So as you can see here, we have the first kind of harvest kind of conversations happening thousands and thousands of years ago. This is circa BCE 1200, but it goes even further back, of an Egyptian tradition. They used to erect the statue of Min, the god of vegetation and fertility, on the harvest fields. You also have in Chinese history, way all the way back to the Shang Dynasty in 1600 BCE, they would celebrate a mid-autumn moon festival during that first fall-autumn moon. And there's some other great traditions like that. The Romans actually held feasts in honor of Ceres, the goddess of cereals. So there you go. Fun fact about Thanksgiving. Didn't necessarily begin in North America, but this has been happening, giving thanks for the harvest to the gods or to the deities or to one another even for a good harvest. So as you can see, Thanksgiving, this concept of giving thanks to the deity or to the earth for a great harvest was way back. I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of years ago, potentially even further back than the Shang Dynasty in 1600. When we kind of lean into our own history, that is European, American kind of history, we get into the conversation from the English Reformation. So at the time, they were kind of reacting to a lot of Roman Catholic traditions, and they were trying to kind of push against that. So it says before 1536, there were 95 church holidays plus 52 Sundays when people were required to attend church and forego work and sometimes pay for expensive celebrations. So they were like, we got to get some holidays. The Puritans out in Europe at the time, they wanted to reduce the number because they wanted to get people to continue working, and they were not trying to be Roman Catholic. And so they did, however, celebrate days of fasting when there was trial and days of Thanksgiving. And so that's kind of where we get the idea of Thanksgiving coming to the United States. The other interesting thing about the United States is that it actually began in Virginia before it came here. In 1619, arrival of 38 English settlers at Berkeley Hundred in Charles City County, Virginia, concluded with a religious celebration as dictated by the group's charter, which required that the day of our ships, quote, the day of our ships' arrival at the place assigned in the land of Virginia shall be yearly and perpetually kept holy as a day of thanksgiving to Almighty God. So it actually started in 1619 for colonizers. So number 2, the first official Thanksgiving was pretty cool, but the love didn't last too long. What am I talking about? Well, we're going to talk about the Wampanoag tribe. It was a Native American people, a loose confederation of several tribes in the 17th century. And today, actually, they encompass about 5 officially recognized tribes, so they're still around. At the time, they lived in southeastern Massachusetts, and I'll show that here. Southeastern Massachusetts in this area. So this is, fun fact, is this is actually where I was born outside. I was like over here, Wareham, Massachusetts, and then my family, or actually probably over here, and then my family actually ended up living in Plymouth for 2 years before I moved down to Virginia when I was a kid. And so you see this tribe, this is where they were. Of course, going back to that, the southeastern Massachusetts, Rhode Island in the beginning of the 17th century at a time of first contact with the English colonists, the territory that included the islands of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. Their population numbered in the thousands. 3,000 Wampanoag lived on Martha's Vineyard alone. So there was thousands and thousands of these folks. Early contacts between the Wampanoag and colonists date from the 16th century when European merchant vessels and fishing boats traveled along the coast of New England. Captain Thomas Hunt captured several Wampanoag in 1614 and sold them in Spain as slaves. So that's really sad. Some of the first interactions with the Wampanoag tribe from Europeans, immediately, hey, let's pick them up, let's take them to Spain, let's start enslaving them. From 1615 to 1619, the Wampanoag suffered an epidemic long suspected to be smallpox. Could have been coming from the Spanish colonizers, sadly. But regardless, researchers suggest that the losses from the epidemic were so large that the colonists were able to establish their own settlements in Massachusetts Bay Colony more easily. So a lot of the reason why the Plymouth County, my ancestors in a lot of ways, were able to settle so easily was because so much of the Wampanoag tribe was already wiped out from smallpox before they even got there. So it's really sad. So then you have the Pilgrims that came in 1921, Puritans as well as other, English Reformed Christians that came, and they suffered a lot of loss. They had about 102 people coming over from the Mayflower, and 45 of them died in the winter, so almost half of them died. And so the next year, as they were getting closer to harvest, they were kind of given a refuge with a lot of the Native American Wampanoag tribes, despite all of the pain that Wampanoags had with colonizers and with their own disease that they were dealing with. And they brought over food. And so this is kind of like a depiction of kind of what this was like. We're not sure, of course, all the pieces of it, but here's the Wampanoag tribe. It's hard to see, and here's some of the others from the tribe, the tribal leaders. And let's see here. 1621 feast, which included 50 Europeans, all who remained of the 100 who had landed, and 90 native guests, lasted for 3 days. So it was actually more natives than Europeans. The event occurred between September 21st and November 11th, 1621. So that was like the whole event, writes James Baker, Plymouth Vice President of Research. 5 deer presented by Pilgrims by King Massasoit. So that would probably be this guy here in the back. And his men were stewed or roasted, open fires, turned frequently, and then presented with mustard sauce. It's pretty amazing. And again, though 90 natives attended the original feast, Linda Coombs, director of the Wampanoag Indian program at Plymouth, says the Native Americans mourn actually on Thanksgiving Day. This is kind of the sad part. She says, the fact is, Native Americans have paid and still pay a heavy price so that others can pursue the American dream. She says, according to Native American custom, Coombs says there have always been Thanksgivings for crop celebrations and green corn, the harvest and planting, but it's a day of mourning for the Wampanoag tribe even today. The number 3 is that our current Thanksgiving holiday actually is celebrated differently than you might think. And so it didn't actually become an official holiday until Northerners dominated the federal government. So while sectional tensions prevailed in the mid-19th century, the editor of a popular magazine, Godey's Lady Book, Sarah Josepha Hale, campaigned for a national Thanksgiving Day to promote unity. She finally won the support of President Abraham Lincoln. And so on October 3rd, 1863, during the Civil War, Lincoln proclaimed the National Day of Thanksgiving to be celebrated on Thursday, November 26th. So it was actually a way to bring unity during and after the Civil War to say, hey, we are one country. We're a unified United States, and so we will give thanks to the Lord, to God, and thanks to our land, for those who do not believe, for bringing us together despite our brokenness and the damage that we've caused to each other. Of course, and the damage that we caused to enslaved Africans and other people of color. So, after that tradition, the holiday was annually proclaimed by every president thereafter, and the date chosen, with few exceptions, was the last Thursday in November. Then FDR came in and said, hey, we are in a depression. We are going to try to extend the Christmas shopping season. And so he tried to pull it back to the 3rd week of November. Not all the states complied, and after a joint resolution in Congress in 1941, Roosevelt issued a proclamation in 1942 designating the fourth Thursday in November as Thanksgiving Day. And then there's just more really interesting facts like as the country became more urban, globalized, and the family members began to live further apart, Thanksgiving became a time to gather together. The holiday moved away from its religious roots to allow for immigrants of every background to participate in common tradition. So Thanksgiving football games came from Yale versus Princeton in 1876. 1920, the Gimbel's department store in Philadelphia staged a parade of about 50 people with Santa Claus at the rear procession. Since 1924, the annual Macy's Day Parade in New York City has continued that tradition with huge balloons since 1927. And the holiday associated with pilgrims and Native Americans has come to symbolize intercultural peace, America's opportunity for newcomers, and the sanctity of home and family. So that's kind of the third point, that, it's a little different than you might think, but it still kind of has some of those same things connected to it. So with those three things in mind, that Thanksgiving did not really start in the United States, that when it did come to the United States, it was a little messier than you might think, and that today now our holiday has a little bit of consumerism in it. What does that really mean? Well, it means all sorts of things, but for me what it means is that Thanksgiving is a recognition still that there is something beautiful about the idea of giving thanks. I'm a Christian, and so I believe giving thanks to God is essential to my very nature. In fact, it's my motivation for everything I do is thanksgiving to God for what He's done in my life, and all those kind of aspects. But even for somebody who doesn't believe or believes in other things, we can give thanks to each other. We can give thanks to where we are in our lives, the blessings that we have, some of the challenges that we face that have grown us, some of the goofy things like Snoopy here over in the corner, or others. Thanksgiving, I love that it says here that it now can be an opportunity for us to kind of reclaim Thanksgiving and say, hey, I give thanks because I'm a part of a country, if you live in the United States, that tries their best to welcome people from all over the world. And that's why it becomes more messy when we do connect, and there tends to be a lot of tension and pain and suffering, is because we're a country that's very unique in that we have over 50 million Americans that live in the United States, 50 million people that live in the United States were not born in the United States. That's insane. We blow apart every other country in the way that we bring in people from different places. And I think that's really special about the United States. And so what is Thanksgiving but that? This idea that despite our history and our past and even our present struggles as human beings, that we want to come together and give thanks together. And so we can celebrate with things like Snoopy at Macy's Day Parade and have fun. We can celebrate with food on our table. Thank you, Google Images. We can celebrate like the Wampanoag tribe and other things like that. This idea that we're celebrating and mourning and enjoy of what it means to be American, what it means to be human, what it means to be a person of history. And so that's my encouragement to you is, I'm not saying if you're a European American for you to feel guilty for what our forefathers and foremothers did, but to recognize that we come from a place of privilege. We come from a place where we are able to have the lives that we have because of some of the pains that other peoples had grown and lived in and still live in to this day. But what do we do with that? Well, we recognize not to feel guilty, but to say, to be thankful for what we have, and then to do our best in that thankfulness to care for other people, to listen, to learn, to connect, to open our minds to people from different cultures, because that's what it truly means to be American. I think that's what it truly means to be human, is to be someone who's willing to learn, to listen, to grow, and to connect. That's all I got. Hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving. Peace.